Hello and welcome to the Doc Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike DeLuke, and it's my mission to help you lead a happier, healthier, and more prosperous life, both personally and professionally. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Doc Podcast. As I say in the intro, the purpose of the Doc Podcast is to help you succeed both personally and professionally. To accomplish that objective, I have guests on to discuss a wide range of topics from clinical to practice management to taxes and accounting to investing to personal growth and development. Interestingly, there is one common denominator underlying all of these areas, and that is money. Money plays a fundamental role in literally everything we do. Yet I find that because we all have different attitudes toward money, it can often be uncomfortable to discuss. But it's essential to have these discussions because if we don't take control of our money, it will take control of us in one way or another. The end goal for all of us is to be able to work because we want to, not because we have to. Another term for that is financial freedom. However, as you've heard other guests on this show discuss, doing that doesn't just happen, even if you have a high-paying job. It takes knowledge, planning, and discipline. The fact is that decisions you make now, today, will ultimately determine if and when you ever reach financial freedom. David Valley is the founder and owner of a real estate investing company. He has a portfolio of over 1,000 doors across 5 states, and he began his journey at a very young age, and by the age of 26 had built, acquired, and exited his first 3 companies. All this while being the first person in his family to ever graduate from high school, let alone college. His mentoring work today focuses on guiding individuals in 9-to-5 careers to invest in commercial real estate as a means of achieving financial independence. We have an amazing discussion about a variety of money-related topics, including how to develop the personal and financial discipline needed to achieve wealth, strategies to generate passive income and achieve financial freedom, the flaws with the traditional approach to investing that most of us take, the need to understand the role that taxes play in investing, some of the benefits of investing in non-paper assets such as real estate, and much, much more. Trust me, this will be a discussion that you do not want to miss and one that could truly change your financial future and your life. Before we begin the show, I do want to make it clear that this discussion is for general information purposes only and is not intended to be specific financial, accounting, or legal advice, nor is it directed toward any one individual or group of individuals. Please consult your own accountant, CPA, and financial advisor for information regarding your specific situation. So without further ado, let's get on to today's episode. Enjoy the show, everybody. Really excited about this conversation. As my audience knows, I love hearing about people's journeys and how they got to this point in their life because people see us where we currently are and they don't often realize what we've gone through, good and bad, to get to the points that we've gotten to. So tell me about your journey. You've had an interesting path to get to this point. It's not like you started in real estate and started investing. You've learned this and taught yourself this and to get to the point that you are now and to be as successful as you are. So talk a little bit about that. You can go back starting as young and as far back as you want to start.
Yeah, appreciate it. First off, yeah, thanks for having me. So, I mean, for me, it's really like going from financial freedom from flipping burgers to flipping commercial real estate, right? So I was born in San Diego on a naval base. My father was in the Navy, so I kind of grew up without my biological father. I'm the first one in my family to not only graduate high school, but let alone college. And then I acquired, bought, and started my first 3 companies in my 20s, and I exited those 3 companies by the age of 26. From there, I went to become the youngest business development officer for Stewart National Commercial Services, which is commercial real estate title insurance. From there, I kind of escaped the matrix, the 9-to-5. I knew that I wanted to use through self-development and through the vehicle of real estate, become financially free. So I spun off from that job, moved out to actually Puerto Rico for the tax benefits. We could spend a whole time talking about that as well. And from the island, I built my own consulting firm for commercial real estate, which led into me acquiring 1,000 doors under 2 years in 5 different states.
Wow.
So my portfolio consisted of 1,000 doors, $100 million of assets under management. It was retail strip centers, mobile home parks, apartment buildings. And we continued to buy real estate until, the feds hiked the interest rate 6 times in 6 months, kind of pumped the brakes on everybody. At that time, I was fortunate enough to be financially free. I got to take some time out and really understand more passion and purpose, to where now my passion is filled with self-development. I love becoming the best version of myself. And what I have found is my purpose is actually helping others not only become the best versions of themselves through self-development, but also helping them for financial freedom. So, as we go on these self-actualization journeys, as we begin to acquire wealth, which gives us some of our time back, we start to understand that the end destination is not really what we're fighting for, right? It's more actually the freedom to understand, why are we here? What is my purpose? And when you get to that level, it opens up a whole different kind of ball game for your life. But you got to be able to get there first. And there's many different ways to get there, right? You could use cryptocurrency, you could use insurance, you could use stock market, you could use real estate, you could build your own businesses, tons of different vehicles to get there. But you've got to become the person who's ready to receive and become that person. I was having a conversation with one of my mentors yesterday, and we kind of came to this aha, which was amazing, of like talking about desire. The goal is to desire nothing, to be present in life. But you can't just desire nothing from the beginning. You have to have the desires to achieve the goals, to achieve the financial freedom, to have everything, and then you want nothing. And we were just sitting there having some coffee, and we were thinking about it, and we're like, man, me and my mentor came from modest means, where, he was an immigrant, came over with $10 in his pocket, was driving for FedEx, but his vehicle is real estate as well. He does like tax deeds and tax liens, but he's bought and sold over 10,000 tax liens all across the country.
Wow.
Multimillionaire, but immigrant FedEx truck driver all the way to multimillionaire, right?
Wow.
For me, same thing, modest means, first when my family graduated high school, first job was flipping burgers, to a multimillionaire in commercial real estate. So it's like we had the desire to have certain material possessions, to have certain freedoms, to have all of that. And it fueled our passion and had to create all the disciplines and everything to get there. And then when we got there, we reached an interesting moment in our lives when, we were growing up, we didn't have, it's interesting. My story was, I couldn't have any cool clothes going to school. I had to have Walmart brand clothes, and I only got like 1 or 2 pairs of jeans or whatever. I really wanted to go to the mall and buy the cool kid clothes, but I never could, right? I remember walking into the mall one day and being like, not only can I buy anything in this mall right now, I can buy this mall.
Had to be a cool feeling.
And you know what I bought?
Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Didn't
I
want
believe
anything.
it. Yep.
See, so just that was just a recently an aha moment, because we don't know what we don't know until we don't know it, right? Like, meaning your truth is what your education is right now. And then when you get new information, you actually process the new information, and your knowledge base and your container and everything kind of grows, right? So for your listeners, I know you and I had a conversation just about like, these being doctors and dentists, and they have their own practices and they're doing certain things. That's their life. And in their container from the investing world, they may only know a little bit about investing. They may just know, some maybe know Bitcoin, some maybe know the stock market, some maybe know 401ks, some Roth IRAs, like all of the little things of investing, but they don't understand that there's a whole world out there of different types of investment vehicles that can get them even greater returns. But, you have to start somewhere. For me, my real estate, I bought a condo, lived in the condo. Then I turned around, rented that out, bought a single family house. Then from there, I did a couple flips. I did everything like the Bigger Pocket podcast, or however you're supposed to do it, right? I did an Airbnb. And then from there, I did a 7-unit apartment building. For me, it wasn't until I did the 7-unit apartment building that the light bulb kind of switched on. I was like, wow, I can go buy a 7-unit apartment building, which is almost like 7 individual dwellings. I can increase the rents on them, decrease the expenses, and that is going to bolster the equity that I have in the project. Huge. So when I found that aha moment, I sold it all. I sold the condo, I sold the house, I sold all the flips. I liquidated the 401ks. I liquidated the insurance policies. I just was like, get me all the cash I can. Then I 1031'd it out into Alabama where I bought 32 units, did my whole value add real estate on the 32 units, and I made $1 million in 12 months. That's when I became a millionaire. And that's when I moved to Puerto Rico and just was like, because I moved to Puerto Rico for the tax benefits. So I don't know if the listeners are very familiar with, then it was, I believe, Act 20 and 22. Now I think it's Act 60, to where you can live in Puerto Rico 6 months out of the year. There's a lot more benefits and things that you have to do, but essentially you only pay like 4% corporate tax.
Wow.
And then you don't pay anything on your capital gains, which is awesome as well. Going deeper into, my story and stuff. I mean, I do come from a lineage of people that have been addicted to drugs, alcoholism, like the side of life where, I could have went either way. Like that's ingrained in my DNA from my lineage. So here's the thing is, anybody can change their story. Your past does not define who you are and what you can do. You want to become financially free, pick your vehicle, start learning and implement. Like you have to do. We are human beings, right? The whole idea is to be present in the moment, but we're also human doers too. We want to be able to continue to evolve, because while I agree with it sometimes, depending on the day, is like, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? I love learning. I love learning new things. And we want to continue to evolve as humans. We want to expand.
Yeah.
And if you're not expanding and you're doing the same thing, that's why, I know you and I were talking about the basis of your listeners and who they are and what they do. So specifically for them, they're in their containers doing their business, right? And the thing is, they don't even maybe have the idea yet of what is possible based upon the tools that they can use to become free.
Yep.
Once they become free, and we talked about it, financial freedom is only one part of the puzzle.
Right.
But once they become financially free, then they are free to pursue their passions and their purpose. Is their purpose still being a doctor or a dentist? Or maybe not. They haven't even had a chance to even think about it. Maybe their purpose is a specific field inside of what they're doing right now that they could do specific research on and like help humanity.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't even know how much of it you knew that is my story. The reason why I'm able to be having this podcast and doing this right now and dedicating so much time and energy to teaching and coaching is because I was able to achieve financial freedom at a relatively young age in my mid 40s because of the decisions and a lot of things we're going to talk about on this episode.
Yeah.
And that put me in a position to be able to give back to my profession and advance the profession much more than I could advance it even at the chair with my own two hands. And that's exactly what you just said. So I think a lot of times people say, they think of, well, I like my work or I like my job. I don't need to be able to retire by 50. I like what I do, or by 60 or whatever your age is, or by 40. But the thing is, it's not saying that you need to achieve financial freedom because you don't want to do what you love to do. It's that you want to achieve that financial freedom so you have more time to do what you love to do and don't have to worry about the fact that you have to see X number of patients in a day or have to work X number of days in a month. And whatever that is, we all have so many gifts and talents that go beyond maybe what our quote unquote job is, that I think we get in that box.
I want to challenge everybody listening to this call. They say that they like their job, they like what they do, they love what they do. Until you are free enough to make a decision that you have to do it or don't have to do it, then you say that. So you don't even know if you love your job or not.
Right. A lot of times you're telling yourself that. I agree. How do you do that though? It's something that in concept sounds very simple, right? And I've been there and I see a lot of colleagues and docs I coach and help, and I work with a lot of young residents who have a lot of debt. And one thing I think everyone should know is that in the medical and dental arena, we learn none of this about money, about investing, about finance, about when you want to financial freedom, retire. We learn none of it. Maybe there's an institution out there, an isolated institution that does teach it. But generally speaking, this is not something in our curriculum. So we get out and we do judge things like in ortho, how many cases can I start in a year? And or a surgeon, how many teeth can I extract? We don't think in terms of, okay, well, if I were to invest in a single duplex versus then roll it into a small apartment building versus a bigger apartment building or a shopping mall, right? We don't think like that. So our container, our box, our mindset is we eat what we kill, and that's it at the end of the day, right? We work for a certain purpose, we get a paycheck, and if we want to make more money, we just have to see more patients or do more of that task. But what you just said is changing that mindset to say, no, I need more of an abundance mindset, that I need to free up more of my time. Instead of spending more time on the task, I need to break that chain and say, no, I've got to reverse my thinking. But while that sounds simple, that is like super hard to do. So could you give advice to people listening on how they can change that mindset? Because when you're that rat in that maze or that hamster on that wheel, man, is it hard to slow it down or change.
The first thing you do is you need to be able to understand and make a mental decision that you want to change, that you want freedom. Like
Mm-hmm.
we talk about physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, it's all freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to make a decision that, there is something outside of the container, the box that you're sitting in right now. Like you have to make a decision that you want this. Once you make a decision you have to want this, you've got to reevaluate your foundation. Because I always take it back to the foundational blocks of, are you getting up early? Are you eating right? Are you meditating? Are you journaling? And do you have basic daily habits that are going to make you a very solid human being, right? Those are just your daily habits. And then vices, you've got to look at yourself as in a sense of like, what are my vices? Identify them. Is it overeating? Is it alcohol? Is it porn? Is it women? Is it social media? Is it working too much and not being present? I mean, you've got to be able to drop those because that's what's taking away from your time to be able to become the best version of yourself. Once you're the best version of yourself, all you've got to do is pick a vehicle, real estate, cryptocurrency, whatever the vehicle is on your path to financial freedom, then you just attack it with urgency. So there's two ways to do it. One, you could just consume as much content as possible. Go to YouTube, go to podcasts, spend the time consuming it. So social media for me, I've crafted it to where all of the input that I get on social media is all educational for everything that I want. They say that you are the average of the 5 people you have around you at any given time. Well, people think that in a physical reality, but also in social media, the people you follow, the influencers, the people that I call them expanders, not influencers, the expanders that you follow on social media are constantly giving you content. So when you're there scrolling on social media, do you have positive information that's coming in that you're learning? Or is it negative stuff? Or is it entertainment? I mean, what is it? Right?
Yep.
So you can spend the time getting the information and then you just need to apply the information. Again, coming back to time and money, right?
Yeah.
How much time do you have? How much money you have? A lot of people that start out maybe have a little bit more time. Maybe they do work their full-time job, they own their practices, but they maybe can get up a little bit earlier and have some more time, or they can spend a little bit more time at night figuring stuff out, but maybe they don't have extra income or extra money saved up. Maybe they're in debt. Like me, I was like $50,000 in debt when I started my real estate journey. So you can trade your time, right? And eventually you're going to start making money. So you're looking at your expenses, cutting your expenses, getting your money, then you can start investing that money. What you're going to see happen is your money is going to start going up, but then you're going to have no time at all. From the time you get up to the time you go to bed, you got your first job, you got your investing, you got your education, but you're starting to make a lot of money. So then what you do in return is you start investing your money to buy back your time. Because at the end of the day, you want all of your time and you want all of the money, and you can do that. So my advice to people is make a decision that you want to do it, reevaluate your life on all levels. And then if you want to go faster, farther, find a mentor, join a group. I've been in several masterminds. I've got coaches in every area of my life. I have found out I have a nutritionist. I have somebody that helps me with my workouts. I've got a surf coach. I've got a Brazilian jiu-jitsu professor. I've got a mentor for real estate. I've got a mentor for business. I've even got somebody that I talk to about my children. Like, these professionals help guide me and I go so much farther, so much faster.
Yeah, there's so many good points. I want to highlight a couple things. One, we all come from these different backgrounds and have traumas and experiences that we can choose to let them hold us back or advance us forward to grow. And there's going to be a time that you have to grind. It's okay to have to grind. Show me a person who has achieved at a high level and has not had to grind at some point. The thing that I love that you referenced is you grind at first to get to a certain point financially. And then you have to change your mindset at some point to say, okay, now I need to use that money that I've been grinding for to get me the time to have more free time to be smarter with my money and get me that freedom that I want. And I think that's something really hard for people to conceptualize, especially in the professional arena, because all we do is grind, right? We're just taught from the beginning, you study harder than everyone, you work harder, you're in the lab later, you're in the library later. And so that's our mentality. And so we get out, and of course we're like, well, I'm just going to grind harder to buy that nice car, buy that house. And then I'll just grind harder to take that nice trip or do what I want to do, or buy another car, or whatever it is, or buy a second house, because that's our mentality. And there's got to be a point at which you say, when I talked about this with Mark McClellan, who introduced us, thank him publicly for that. But where you start to see that margin when you're grinding, when you get to a point where you're developing a margin, right? And I think we can agree on the fact you've got to grind enough to get a margin. You've got to have that margin. Once you have that margin, to me, is when everything else you were saying really starts to come into play. At that point, what do you do with that margin? Who do you associate with what you do with that margin? What are you now doing with your time? Because you have a margin. So in theory, you could back off the grind a little bit, right? Depending how big the margin is, and be able to do other things, invest in other areas, self-help, growth. So it's really important for people to understand that starting with nothing and growing to have an abundance is not a foreign concept. It happens all the time. And there are so many people who get to that point and still aren't happy. They're still not fulfilled. And I want to be very clear with the audience that just obtaining financial freedom and independence does not mean you're going to be happy and fulfilled in life. Because if you're not living your passion and surrounding yourself and doing something for a greater purpose, whether it's God, the universe, your community, whatever you feel it is, you're still going to have an empty void. But the hard part, and this doesn't have to be professionals, this is just anybody who goes through a formal traditional education. We're taught you go out, you get a good job, you invest in your 401k, maybe buy some stocks on the side, maybe dabble in a little cryptocurrency, right? And then you work hard and you save enough money that hopefully one day you can retire. How and why did you break that mindset? Because you were going down that path. You were in a corporate gig. You were making good money. So where is that switch where you go from grind, doing, just working hard for your dollars to saying, no, I'm going to do this a little differently and I'm going to make my money work for me?
Yeah. So for me, right, like coming from my background, I wasn't even supposed to do what society is supposed to tell you. I was supposed to fall short a lot earlier than that.
Right.
So
Fair, yeah.
for me, after graduating high school, then after graduating college, it's like, oh, okay, starting my own business, selling my own business, getting into the corporate world. I mean, I was making really good money, like a high six-figure earner as a business development officer, right? But what I started to see was the goalposts were moving farther out. The container was getting bigger, but my happiness was not growing with it at all. Every time I hit one of those new milestones I thought would change my life, it never did. I was never happy. Like the first time that I saw
Did you recognize that at the
in,
time, or was this like looking back?
No, nope. It was the next thing. What's the next thing, right?
Yeah,
Like buy a
yeah.
house. What's the next thing? Get married. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Get a
Yeah.
corporate job, sell the company, exit the company, start a company. Like it wasn't until I got to a point, and I would say I was probably 35 years old, that I hit a point in life where I was making a lot of money coming in. I had a condo I was renting out. I had a house. I had some nice cars. I had some nice watches. I was still like $50,000 in debt, had no, passive income or anything. And I was like, well, society told me I'm supposed to be here right now.
Right.
And I thought by the time I got here, like the golden gates would open up and I would be like super happy for my life and I wouldn't experience any kind of bad feelings at all.
Yeah.
And I was like, and that's when I like took a step out of the hamster wheel or off to the side and was like, there's got to be something has to change, and that's when I started my self-development journey. Like, I started to see other people in the same arena as me, but they were talking about passive income. They were talking about taking these trips. They were talking about quitting their jobs. And I was like, what do these people know that I don't know? So I started listening to podcasts, started joining a mastermind, started to really surround myself with people that were doing this. And it just opened up a whole new world for me. And I was like, holy cow, like I am doing all of this wrong.
This was in like your mid-30s-ish, you'd say?
35 years old.
So for everyone listening out there, it doesn't have to be, you can be well into your years in practice or whatever you're doing. And it can be older than that too. But I think a lot of times people think, well, oh, they figured this out in their 20s. No, no, you went down this path for a while.
No, I mean, I've bought and sold companies by this point. I was in a room full of 50 other people nationwide, and I was the top producer of these guys that are in their 60s and almost 70s in this profession for this job. It's like, it was just fuel, and I just kept going and driving and driving. And I think I just kept hitting my head against this ceiling. And I was like, what is this feeling? Like, I feel worse now, and I should be feeling blissfully satisfied, happiness, all of the things.
Wow.
That's where I kind of took a step back and had that, because that's where self-actualization started for me. Like, I was butting my head up against self-actualization because I couldn't go any farther, right? I was still running from self-destruction.
Yeah.
And I was running so far, so fast to where I outran it, but there was nothing else kind of left for there except for like quitting like alcohol, some of like the deep stuff, like not drinking and stuff anymore.
Yeah.
But that's when I took a step back and I was like, okay, there is a different way to do this. So, I mean, I'm 42 now. So, from 35 until 39 was a learning process, getting out of the rat race, really working on myself. Like I went from probably I made my first million on my 32 unit when I was 39 years old. By the time I was 41, I was almost up to 8 figures.
Wow.
24 months.
Wow.
It can happen fast if you decide that's what you want to do. Yeah. Like for me is I quit the corporate job. I burned all the bridges behind me. I went in as an operator. I managed about $5 million of other people's money. It was friends and family, people from masterminds. We went and bought 20 different projects in 2 different states. Like I used that momentum and that chip on my shoulder and everything that I have learned all the way through my life, and I applied it to real estate. But now with that, real estate has provided me financial freedom. And I'm not telling everybody, hey, go out there and quit your job right now. You can do this on a smaller scale while still working your practice, right? You just have to know what your vehicle is, and then you have to do it. But I didn't know what happiness was until I became financially free, which allowed me to follow my passion and my purpose. And again, going back to the beginning of what we talked about, I don't really have any desires right now. I mean, I live in Nashville part of the year. I live in Puerto Rico part of the year. I'm geographically free. I'm financially free. I love my family. Like I've got a 2-year-old daughter. I get to spend all the time in the world with her. But again, something internally, us as humans, I think we are meant to expand in this life and continue to learn. Like they say, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? Like I do believe in that because I do want to continue to learn.
Yep.
So when you do get to the next level of this is when you really start to be like, oh God, like what's my purpose?
Yep.
But for the specifics of this conversation with your listeners, you just have to understand that there is something different out there. Yeah. And you have to go down your path of doing it, and you can go as fast or as slow as you want to do that.
Yep. Well, thank you. That's great advice, really is. And on that, I want to add, I would encourage everybody out there, take some time alone with yourself. So often, especially today with the devices and the constant noise. I drive to teach at Nova. It's about an hour and 15-minute drive when I go over to the East Coast, Florida, from where I am on the West Coast. And some of those drives, I don't put a podcast on. I mean, some I do. Some I'll listen to audiobooks and podcasts and try to expand my reality on things and think about things differently, or I'll listen to educational content within my profession. Sometimes I don't put music on. Sometimes I don't put anything on, and I just think. I think about where I am in my life right now, what I'm doing, where I could be better, where I'm falling short, where I'm succeeding, how I want to design my next lecture or my next presentation or my next podcast, the type of message I want to put out to the world. And I don't think it gets said enough that sometimes you just need to be comfortable being alone in your own head and just getting comfortable with who you are. Maybe you go for a walk once a day to get some steps in. Like sometimes just don't put a podcast on. Just walk and listen and think and breathe and do what you have to do to start to get your head in the right place. What we do in the medical dental profession, and even what you were doing in the corporate arena, right? It's so common when you're a high earner and a high producer and whatever it is that you put so much into that you don't have much left in your tank for anything else. And I was down that path too, right? And I had to redirect, and my knows for the most part about my journey and how I redirected that to be able to have more control over my time and more freedom, which, as we're going to get to, if I didn't have the financial piece, I couldn't have done. And that's where those two things really do cross over and coexist and intermingle. But how many people are okay with that indefinitely, grinding at that pace? I'm sure there are some out there that it's just what they're wired to do. They don't really care. The personal relationships, the other things, they're just myopic, focused. I'm not saying they shouldn't be. It's their life. They just want to grind. But for a lot of people, I'd be willing to say most people, they want to be able to have some of that quality time in their life, whether it be with their loved ones or with just doing social golfing or whatever it is, right? You want to be able to have some of that free time to be able working out, training. And it starts to then impinge upon those things where now you can't stay healthy and fit. You can't eat well. I shouldn't say can't. You don't eat well. You don't maintain your fitness. You do start drifting more towards vices. And it's this vicious cycle. And we're down the path where we easily could have done those things. So when you get there now, you're at that point. Most people don't know where to begin. And you had to have a starting point. And I think it's overwhelming. You alluded to earlier, like if you try to jump all in on everything and invest in all these different things at once, and it's so overwhelming, you can't do it. So can you recommend to the listeners, how can people start with not a ton of money up front and make decisions? Because everyone's afraid because they don't know about this stuff. And we're going to say that they've read about it or researched it or they've done their homework and due diligence, because that has to be done. You alluded to that. But now it's time to do it. Now it's time to take that margin of money that Martin and I talked about and start to create what he calls, I think, his wealth fund or his wealth generation fund. You're going to do something different with that. You're not going to buy a nicer car. You're not going to buy or another car and a bigger house. You're going to start to make that money work for you. What does that look like?
Yeah. So I want to touch on two things you said, and it'll segue into this topic. Number one, you are not your job. Just like Brad Pitt in Fight Club. Like you are not your job. Our identity is attached to our jobs. When people say, hey, what do you do? Everybody tells you their job.
Yep.
Right. So me in the corporate world as a business development officer, I grinded from 9 a.m. all the day long. Then I go to networking events on the nights, flying around the country. It was a grind, right? But I was my numbers. My numbers was a top business development officer. I was attached to being that, and that's who I was.
Yes, that's how you got your fulfillment, so to speak.
Until I learned that like I am not my job. That is not just my worth. That was a whole mind switch, right?
Yep.
And then the other thing is we keep using this word grind. Well, grind to me sounds like gears that are grinding that just need a little bit of WD-40. We need to talk more about working in flow. Like when you're in flow state, it's not a grind. Like if dentist practice or whatever you're doing it shouldn't be a grind if that's what you're in the flow state. Like you were talking about a higher power. Well, a higher power puts us into this flow state to where, like this podcast, I don't even know how long we've been on it right now, but I feel like we've only been on it for about 5 minutes.
Agreed.
Because I'm in complete flow state right now talking about all of this, and I could do it until I drop down in the face. So it's really finding your passion and your purpose to be in flow state to where you don't have to grind. If you're grinding, that means that if you're not in flow, you're not really in alignment with your vision, right? So you got to get clear on your vision. You got to get into flow state, but segueing into where to start. So let's just say for across the board, because everybody has a different starting point, right? But let's say you do have a little bit of knowledge in the vehicle that you want to get into. Maybe it's like crypto investing, or maybe it's real estate. What I would do is I would find, there's so many really good mentors out there and groups out there you could join, right? And you join the group because not only do you get access to the network of the people that you're joining, but then you also have somebody that has done this to scale 100 times what you're trying to do. You are going to avoid so many pitfalls and so many road bumps, but then you're also going to have somebody telling you like, hey, you're on the right path, and it'll feel good to make your first investment. Because let's just say if you got $50,000 and you're putting it down on a 5-unit, a multifamily value add, you're going to be a little scared because that's a lot of money. But I can say, hey, look, I've looked over all of your stuff. This is a great deal. You need to move forward. So you move forward with that confidence. Because for me, my ego would not let me join a group to get a mentor because I thought that I could do it myself. Like, I'm not going to pay $10,000 to join this program, but I hindered myself from going farther faster, right now, like I was talking about, is I've got mentors in every area of my life. And my life right now is on rocket fuel to the vision that I want, because I understand the value now of having the people in my life that will help me. And one thing I do want to put a little asterisk to is that you really need to make sure that the mentor or group or teacher or whatever that you're going to get yourself involved with is legit. They're doing what they say that they've done, but look at all areas of their life. If they're not somebody that you want to be like in all areas of their life, like how they treat their family, with like everything, you don't want to be part of their ecosystem, because they obviously, there's parts of that stuff that is not in alignment, right? So once you start making a little bit more money, you can start to diversify. But I would say at the very beginning, find the vehicle you want and then go for that one.
Yeah, and investing is a team sport, right? I mean, Kawasaki talks about that, and Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's a team sport. You can't go at this alone. And a lot of these concepts are actually, Rich Dad, Poor Dad was the book I read almost 25 years ago that really changed my life and got me thinking about things differently. So I recommend that to people when I'm talking to them about this topic, because it'll just start getting you thinking differently. A lot of what we're talking about today of breaking that mindset, going from the S, the Superman, self-employed, or the E, the employee that's just grinding away for that paycheck and getting the taxes taken out before you get your money, to the B, the business owner, or the I, the investor, going through those different quadrants, as he calls them, the cash flow quadrants. As you're talking, I'm hearing a lot. I would be willing to bet you've read that book or are very familiar with Robert's content.
Ken McElroy is his real estate guy.
Yes.
So I even know Ken. So Robert makes all of his money in his education company. What he does is he makes a lot of money in his education company, his podcast, his video game, all of his stuff. He takes his money, gives it to Ken. Ken goes invests in apartment buildings, value add, same stuff that I do. And therefore now, because of the cost seg and tax benefits and everything, Robert's money filters through apartment buildings and he gets it tax-free through real estate. So he made his vertical in his time was education, right? Made all of his money. And then he gave it over to his partner in the real estate to not pay the taxes. So that's many hands make light work, but he found a vehicle, his vertical and his horizontal, right?
Right. That's actually a great example, because that's the flow. We were saying grind, but I like that though. That's the flow. His flow was writing a book and educating people and taking the time going door to door. Back then it was pre-internet, pre-social media for sure, having to put the work in. And then with that margin, he started doing smarter things. And then we're going to come back at the end of this to some of the tax advantages too, because as you alluded to, and there's a lot of people probably heard that and they're like, wait, he didn't pay taxes. He's breaking. No. Legally didn't pay taxes on that, because the laws are set up and written by the politicians, the lawmakers. And again, as they say in that book, right? He who makes the rules keeps the gold. That's he calls it the golden rule. And that's what he says is he who makes the rules keep the gold. Well, the politicians, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, they're writing these laws so that they can take advantage of them. And then we just sit down here and argue over it and try to figure it out. But when you play the game they play, which is investing in the types of things you just referenced in real estate, there's so many built-in tax deductions on the back end that's why you hear the sort of line come up every 4 years in politics of, oh, well, the person working answering the phones is paying more higher tax percentage than the person that owns the company. It's not because the person who owns a company is cheating or doing anything unethical. They've just figured out how to play the game that the lawmakers made, and they're winning at that game. I mean, it's no more complicated than that. So sorry for that little tangent, but I thought people probably heard that about not paying taxes, and they might have gotten a little bristled by that, but it's because he's legally had the deductions to offset his tax burden through the vehicle that is real estate. Would you agree with that?
Yep. Yeah. So here's the thing that people need to understand. So income tax, right? So we as real estate investors, we don't pay taxes on the dividends of the income that we get from the property, because we buy the properties, we fix them up, it's depreciation, we can cost seg them. But here's the thing, we pay property taxes. Like I probably pay $500,000 in property taxes a year. So do I pay taxes? Yes. But my tenant, that's actually passed on to my tenants, because my tenants pay the rent. It's part of the business. Here's the thing about politicians that you need to understand is, for whatever you think about politics and stuff like that, they're not dumb. So take this scenario in an example. So for us, they understand how our mind works as investors. So they say, okay, look, you buy a building, we'll let you take the tax benefits of like 27 and a half years of depreciation. You can cost seg it. You can get all of that up front to where you pay no taxes on the income you get from this apartment building. We're like, that's awesome. but they know what we're going to do with that money. We're going to take that money and we're going to go buy another apartment building and we're going to fix it up.
Yep.
So we actually work for the government by going out and fixing up all of these because if we didn't fix them up, the government would have to step in and fix them up. The government's like, cool. But then there's the thing that you alluded to, the 1031 exchange.
I was just about to say, hence came the 1031 exchange.
We have to sell our apartment buildings instead of taking the money out and going and buying the Lamborghini. We actually have to 1031 it and buy a new building to where we continue to move our wealth down the road. So in essence, the winner is the government. And yes, we don't pay taxes on our income, but in the grand scheme of things, we are the ones that are actually out there fixing up the workforce housing. So they don't have to do it.
Right.
So, but do we get to benefit it? Sure. I mean, I've got like a negative $1.5 million tax bill because of all the real estate
carryover losses.
Do I pay? I haven't paid taxes in like 5 years. But I pay property taxes, but my business pays the property taxes.
Right. And to be clear for people, I don't want to speak for you, but you're filing returns. It's not that you're not filing tax returns. It's that the flow through and the tax deductions built in through the cost segregation analysis, et cetera, has been built for the government to want people like you to keep investing in these businesses and flipping these properties. And people think of a flip, they think of a 1-year flip or a 2-year flip. Some of these that I'm involved in with 1031 exchanges and Delaware statutory trusts and manufactured housing, qualified opportunity zones. I mean, some of these things are 5, 7, 10-year quote unquote flips. You know, they're sometimes longer time, but the game is set to be, once you can go from just being that employee, punch the clock, whether you're punching it for a low wage or a high wage, you're still just punching the clock and you're paying the maximum amount of taxes that you can pay for anything you do. And I'm not saying you don't do that. And I'm not saying you don't sometimes have to do that for a while. We both have done that for a period of time and probably wouldn't be where we are if we hadn't done that for a period of time. The thing is shifting your mentality at a point when you flip that switch and say, oh, wait a minute, there's different rules here. And I need to kind of learn these rules and figure out what they are. And maybe you just want to do this on the side and you don't want to stop being in a corporate job or in a medical profession. That being said, that doesn't mean you still can't do this. And I keep trying to drive that home because I think people think, oh, well, I'm not going to be a dentist or be a physician or be in the corporate arena or whatever it is anymore. And I kind of like that no, fine. But you still can start to get involved in these. And some of them can be very, very passive, very passive. Like once you make that initial, you don't have to be like David necessarily and go make this your full-time job to do this. And starting small is okay. You had money coming in from a high-paying job and you still decided to start small. That's another trap I see so many of my colleagues fall in because we are typically generating high wages. We think I've got to go big or I've got to do a $250,000 investment as my first investment in this. And the other thing with real estate, which I think you were implying, but I just want to underline a little bit, is you could buy a $250,000 property as your first investment with maybe 10% down for $25,000 or maybe 20, so $50,000. So, and again, going back to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, they talk about this all the time. You get more leverage because you're leveraging debt or other people's money, as they call it, with the bank's money. Yes, there's an interest rate, but it's about cash flow. It's what's coming in and what's going out and having a surplus at the end. So when you start small and responsible, let's say you don't get that ROI. Maybe you get 20. You still learned a ton. Let's say you got 0. Right? Let's say you just broke even on it, right? It didn't end up working out. You still develop the systems of understanding how this game is played. Maybe you had formed an LLC to own that property. You had to get insurance. You had to talk to an attorney. And then you file your tax returns differently because you have to have a K-1 or you start, and all of a sudden you're like, this isn't that complicated. And then once you start doing it again, it gets easier and easier. And then, and I keep quoting Kiyosaki on this, but it's just more zeros, right? Like you just, okay. So the next one you go add another 0. And that's what you were saying before, David. And some people might hear that and say, well, yes, there's a huge difference in 50,000 and 5 million. Well, it's just the zeros. The game, the way you play that game, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my mentality has been the way you play that game is really the same, whether it's $5,000 on the line or 5 million on the line. The rules, the laws, the regulations, the tax advantages are all pretty comparable. It's just a bigger pie, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just to piggyback on what you were saying is, remember like the condo and the single family that I bought when I started out, I mean, I didn't have a lot of cash, but you start to build equity in those things. So you don't just need cash to start. There's equity that you could get into. So my first 7 unit was kind of in my backyard, which I broke even on that 7 unit, but I learned how to underwrite it. I learned how to buy it. I learned how to do the value add. I learned everything, but I broke even on it.
Mm-hmm.
So then I took the equity in the condo and the house and I 1031'd it into a out of state. So I lived in San Francisco, out of state into Alabama.
There you
I
go.
managed a 32-unit apartment rehab from an armchair in San Francisco.
Wow.
I went out to the property twice. It was when I made $1 million in that deal that I decided that the light kind of went off. So kind of fast forward to what you were saying is I've got probably 2 or 3 properties right now that I've never even been to. I've got a 32 unit in Tennessee that I've owned for 3 years, did a full rehab on it, refinanced all my cash and everything. And I still have not set foot on that property because I know the property manager. I interviewed the property manager. I had the systems, everything. And as you continue to evolve through your investing journey, I mean, you don't have to go, gasoline on fire like I did and buy 1,000 units in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start investing now in something small and continue, it compounds.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll say in like 3 to 5 years time, you could easily have enough passive income coming in that would pay for your complete lifestyle right now.
Right.
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 It just depends on what you want to do. And we didn't even talk about the other aspect of real estate, which is seller financing. 30% of my portfolio, I have a portion of it seller finance
Mm-hmm.
to where I got a bank debt and a seller financing debt where I put no money down. So I own probably a couple hundred units that I paid $0 for. And I'm just going to, it's a delayed gratification. I'll refinance the first and the second out and I'll have those will cash flow and I'll make, a couple $100,000 on those. But, you don't have to have money to get started.
Yeah, I'm really happy you said you don't have to have a ton to get started. The equity part that you said I love too, because people think, well, I only made 10,000 off of that. Yeah, but if the property appreciated and you can roll it into another property using that equity, you may have only cashed out that percentage if you decide to cash out, but if you flip that and roll that, the gains can become exponential over time. And the part of the time too, I want to touch on that you said. I mean, I have properties. I don't even know how many states. I mean, I could look, but all over the country that I own. That most of them that I've done in 1031 exchanges or DSTs or manufactured housing opportunity zones. I've never been to these places. I've vetted them. I have a team that I work with that helps me vet these properties. I look at them. We look at the numbers. We look at the cash flow. We look through all the opportunities. We make sure they're with qualified investors and it's a solid group. We're not just throwing money to random people to invest in these things, but you start to get into these other investing areas and then you meet people like me meeting you and you meet people that are doing this. And then you start to say, hey, let's pool some resources here. And this game can be a team sport. And I really want to drive that home that because a lot of people hear it and they think, I don't have time to manage a duplex. I don't want to own a duplex. I don't want to own a 5-unit apartment building in my town. I don't want to deal with it. Okay, that's one way to go. But there's also the way where you just basically invest and you don't have to sell a property to invest in a type of Delaware statutory trust type of environment.
Yep.
And then when you get into one of those and it flips in 5 or 7 years, then you can roll that in and start playing that game.
Let's use a real life example here, right? I have people that come into my coaching program that, they're like, I may want to do this, I may not want to do this, but they end up just learning everything and then just investing with me, part of the network. I know that you had Mart on the show, right? Mart is a good buddy of mine. I met him in Egypt on a trip. He invests with me, right?
Yep.
Their whole group invests in one of my apartment buildings. So there's a difference between an owner operator and an owner investor, right?
Thank
you. So
you.
you could be the owner operator. So that means that you have to go out, find the property, underwrite the property, do all the due diligence, do all the things and manage the property. Or you can be an owner investor. So where you come in and you can invest in a syndication or you can do a joint venture. You can put your capital with somebody and you guys buy the property as a group. You may not be the day-to-day operator who manages the asset manager and the property manager. You could just give capital and there's exponential. I mean, we're talking about, 23, 25, even somewhere up to 27 to 30% IRR. And then you get it if you want to get in the weeds on it, but there's like limited partners, LPs and GPs and different ways that you can get into them. But you can invest your capital, right? Because again, it goes back to time and money.
Yes.
If you don't have a lot of time, say for your listeners, right? They have their practice. They've got dentists that are underneath them. They're rocking and rolling. They don't feel like they're grinding. They're flowing. They're making a lot of money. But what do they do? What are they going to do with their money? Right.
Right.
So they can invest that money like Robert invests with Ken
Right.
Same thing, right? They can invest their money with other operators
Yep.
and make those large returns, because it's not only the cash flow they get, they also get the tax benefits. They also
Yep.
get the appreciation.
Yep.
They also get everything that comes with it, right?
Yep.
But there's also like the David Ramsey model where you pay everything off, which I'm
Yep.
completely against that model. But
Mhm.
how many of your lists against, yeah, how many of your listeners probably have their house paid off or a lot of the equity in their primary residence that they could tap into?
Actually,
Right.
stay
I
on
mean, I
that for
know
a
it's,
second. Why are you against it? Because I'm with you. I'm with you. But I hear a lot of people, especially younger people now, are really
Mhm.
following that line of thinking. So why is that mentality, which I'll summarize quickly, tell me if I have it wrong, of pay down all your debts first before you start trying to make more money, get rid of all, it's debt averse, right? You're debt
Yep.
averse. You don't want any debt. Debt is bad. And the way to get comfortable in life is to just pay your debts down.
Because of leverage.
Mm-hmm.
Good debt is leverage, right? So
Mm-hmm.
look, there's the difference between good debt and bad debt. Like I've got zero credit card debt. I paid off all of my student loans,
Thank
right?
you. Yep.
I lease my cars, but it's like I'm $50 million in debt right now. But that's to the
On
banks
paper,
on
right?
my
Exactly. Right.
on you know, right? So that I'm in debt, but not because I leverage. Like for me, I own 1,000 dwellings that I could live in. I don't even own my primary residence. I rent it
Yep.
because the cash flow from all of my properties pays my rent.
Yep.
I lease all my cars. All of my properties lease my cars. So
Yes.
I use leverage, properly leveraged leverage. I just want to make sure you say that. They're not
Yep.
completely like, it's like 65, 70% loan to value. But that leverage helps me grow and create more inbound cash flow that comes in. So if you spend all of your time trying to just pay everything off and then start, you're just going to be so far behind, the growth of money.
Yes, thank you for that. And I think this being a scarcity mentality. And when I hear that and what Dave Ramsey says, and I agree, fundamentally sound, right? Don't get yourself in crazy credit card debt, consumer debt, or any really credit card debt or consumer debt. And you don't want to be taking out these huge car loans and on depreciating assets that you're just going to have no value in. Agreed. I think we would agree on that. It's for the masses, which is why I want my audience to hear us having this discussion, because Dave Ramsey's essentially saying that you just want to keep those expenses super low. And if you have a certain income up here, just keep those expenses below that, and you're going to be okay in the long run. Sure, there's certainly there's validity in that. The problem is if your income is all dependent on your job and you lose your job or the economy tanks in the sector you're in or whatever else, how are you going to lower your expenses below no income, right? You haven't built any fail safes. What you're saying, what David was alluding to, is we look at our balance sheets differently. And he's saying, don't accumulate liabilities. You want no liabilities. We're saying, no. I'll take I'll take a good number with a lot of zeros in my liabilities column, my balance sheet, but my asset side is going to be way higher than that. And my net worth then is going to be exponentially higher than it could be if I only focused on the income expenses side of the balance sheet. So I feel like Dave Ramsey's very income expense focused balance sheet mentality, whereas what we were talking about, what Kiyosaki talks about, those concepts are more on the asset liability side of a balance sheet so that you get a higher net worth, right?
Yeah. For his book and for what you're talking about, for maybe 95% of the population, financial hygiene, right? Have financial hygiene.
Mm-hmm.
Your income and your expenses, do not have your expenses over your income. Don't go buy depreciating asset. But then you get to a point where it's like, okay, you have good financial hygiene, go make more money. Leverage and solve problems. That's how the wealthy get wealthy and stay wealthy. Leverage, solve problem. Leverage, solve problem. That's all real estate is, just problem solving,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
right?
Yep.
And you can do it many different ways.
A lot of what we're talking about is probably making people a little uncomfortable. And meaning if they don't have their financial house in order, or maybe they follow something like Dave Ramsey. I know when I first read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was to my wife and I combined about $250,000 of student loan debt and no consumer debt or anything of that sort, but we didn't have any assets to our name. And I was going to be going out and starting this practice. I remember I read that he said, your house is not an asset. And I remember being like, you're wrong. You're wrong. Because that's just what I knew. That's what your house is, your biggest asset, right? It's what we all hear. And that feeling I got back then, which I still remember, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are getting now from a lot of what we're saying, because it's just challenging the reality. What I would ask the listeners is just start to think differently. If you can just take out of this to just change your mindset, you don't have to do it exactly like I did it or exactly like David did it. We just want you to change the way you think about money and investing and how you approach this. In the beginning, when we were talking about the mental side, the emotional side, the psychological side of all of this, it's just about a mindset change. Now we've gotten a little more granular as we've gotten into this, because I think it's fun for those who want to know this side. And personally, I just like geeking out on this stuff and talking about this stuff. But ultimately, I just want the listeners to understand that it's not a matter of our way being the right way or the only way. It's just a different way that could get you to a different spot. Well, this has been awesome. I mean, I literally, I've loved this, and I can't thank you enough for your time and knowledge and expertise and your honesty, just sharing your personal stories and getting into all of this. It's really been a pleasure for me to listen to. So just to close, what are some closing words you'd have to kind of summarize it all and everything we've been talking about? What's the take-home message you'd like the audience to have?
Yeah, so I'd really like people to understand, and something like you just said was, this is a lot of information, and right now, some of it may be truth to you right now, like you understand it. Some of it may be new information and you're trying to digest it. You have a level of discernment. You're kind of like, I kind of agree with this or I don't agree with that. I just say, do your homework, do your due diligence. But if it's piqued your curiosity, go with it. There's a reason that you are listening to this podcast right now, and this information is coming to you because, again, I kick it back to like the laws of the universe, law of attraction, law of action. You may be subconsciously asking for this information because you want something in your life to change.
Mm-hmm.
The universe is giving you this information from the law of action. It's up to you what you want to do with this information that you're receiving. And there are tons. I mean, we live in the age of Aquarius, which is all about information. You can go to YouTube and type in anything, and there's always information about it. You can reach out to me. I love helping people, but if it's piqued some sort of curiosity, go down the rabbit hole with it. See what comes of it. And it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. You can simplify this, but you have to build the foundation first of yourself. Put your mask on before you put other people's oxygen mask on. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself first. Make sure that everything in your life is good, and then go down the financial piece of this.
Awesome. Thank you. If people want to get in touch with you, how do they? And I can put it in the show notes, the best way to reach you if people have questions.
Yeah, come follow me on Instagram, The Real David Valley. DM me. I'm on it all the time, trying to give away a bunch of self-development, a bunch of real estate, free content for you guys to really get going. Facebook, David Valley, or you can even email me if you, for some reason, you don't have social media, which is fine. DavidValley88@gmail. You can just email me. Again, purpose for me is helping people, and I'd love to help steer you in the right direction to help you facilitate your next step.
Awesome. Thank you. Like I said, it's just been really, really cool, and appreciate your time, expertise, and getting people to think differently about this stuff. Really been great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Doc Podcast. Be sure to visit theorthocoach.com to get access to ADA CERP recognized CE courses, or to schedule a private one-on-one coaching session with me. Also, if you know of someone who would make a great guest for this show, or if you'd like to be a guest yourself, please email me at drmike@theorthocoach.com. And be sure to join the Doc community on Facebook for more great content. Thanks so much for listening, and always remember, you have been blessed with the ability to do amazing things.